When did LEGO video games go from sounding like this to this? And why? What changed in the world of playing with LEGO bricks, and why did it need to change? Before the turn of the century, the LEGO company relied heavily on kids' imaginations in playing with their LEGO bricks. Imagination drove the stories of the sets that they would play with, so the LEGO group would produce the sets with cowboys, aliens, and several city structures, but never gave you a character-driven story. In some ways, this was a contributor in what would become a significant financial struggle within the LEGO group. Costs of production were not going down, and the company was trying to be too diverse in the type of product they were selling, and people started to become disinterested in buying new sets because once you had one Wild West town, what would you do with another one? With no stories tied to each set, they didn't really have anything that separated them from other sets, or in some cases even worse, what separated them from other brick building toys. This started to change in 1999 with the introduction of LEGO Rock Raiders, which had its own series of stories outside of the sets and even had its own video game, but unfortunately was a relatively short-lived theme. What really changed the trajectory of the LEGO group was none other than Star Wars. Partnering with a movie franchise that has the word war in the name and depicts some pretty graphic stuff is something that was not exactly popular within the LEGO group. The LEGO group has always wanted to make sure that they are family friendly so that all ages feel comfortable playing with it, and so if they partner with a movie that shows someone's arm getting cut off, that's not exactly good for all ages. On top of that, there was actually a concern about how German mothers of the time would view the LEGO company trying to sell their kids stormtroopers. After a lot of debate and some serious persuasion, the LEGO group finally decided to dive into this partnership headfirst, and it was a huge success. Now kids everywhere could recreate memorable moments from the movies that they loved, or they could create whole new scenes based on what they could build. At a time where the LEGO group was struggling to stay afloat as a business, the LEGO Star Wars line was a huge player in keeping them alive until they could turn their struggles around. The impact of LEGO Star Wars gave them the confidence to partner with other franchises and let the kids decide how they wanted to play with their bricks. But there's actually a different original LEGO theme that gave them the confidence to be able to create more original stories for their LEGO sets. That was none other than my favorite, LEGO Bionicle. Depending on who you ask, Bionicle was the savior of the LEGO group. It was this original concept that blended robots with tribal islands and gave them amazing powers through the use of their individual masks. The lore of Bionicle runs incredibly deep, and the physical toy line asked the question, what if you could build your own action figure? On a personal level, Bionicle really defined a lot of my childhood. One of my earliest memories is of my dad coming home from a work trip and bringing me back my very first Bionicle. It was Toa Gali, by the way. I still remember to this day the day that they said Bionicle was canceled, and I decided that was the day I had to grow up. I didn't actually grow up, I just said that I would. Bionicle was hugely influential, insanely profitable, had its own line of books, comic books, movies, and of course, video games. And between the partnership with Star Wars and the creation of the Bionicle line, original stories became an important part of building with LEGO bricks, and would lead into the video games reflecting those same feelings of incredible storytelling and epic adventure. We mentioned in the previous video about how playing with LEGO bricks is epic, but what exactly does that mean when we talk about something feeling epic? A phrase that I consider to be synonymous with the idea of epicness is something that is larger than life. An amazing quest to defeat a dragon, or a space adventure to explore a new world, or even someone winning a race against all odds. Translating the idea of something epic into music is something that has been done over and over and over, to the point where if I were to talk about epic music, you probably know the kind of music that I'm talking about. I would argue that what we typically see as epic music is only a part of what the genre actually is, and I would subdivide it into three categories. The first type of epic music I would talk about is the genre of pessimistic epic music. This is something you typically hear at a final boss fight. Dark, foreboding, ominous, but still grand and larger than life. You don't want it to sound like a horror game, but you still want to convey this sense of fear. Typically, you can't define an entire soundtrack just on how the final boss sounds, but there is a soundtrack that is a really good example of capturing the essence of pessimism throughout its epic music. If you're a gamer, I think you know exactly where this is going. Let's take a look at Elden Ring. Elden Ring and the other Dark Souls games are built off of difficult gameplay in a world that is dark and the bosses are just downright scary. From the beginning of Elden Ring, you get a clear message from the music. You're gonna die a lot in this game. The main theme itself sounds like a final boss to most video games. And that's before you ever start your adventure at all, which is exactly what they want you to feel. The idea of a Dark Souls game is that if the challenge seems impossible, then your satisfaction in beating the challenge will be incredible. So if the music is conveying that you're going to die and then you don't, you should feel this sort of catharsis of like, I did it. I did something that should not have been possible. But from the get-go, the music should translate as, I don't think I can do this. That's pessimistic. Now, what you typically hear as epic music, I would define as realistic epic music. This is the kind of stuff you'll hear around other bosses or main menus to convey a sense of challenge or adventure that's waiting to be overcome. The situation should be challenging, yes, but you should feel like you have a fighting chance. There are plenty of examples in music to convey realistic epic music. What I think is a great example is Batman Arkham City. When you take a quick look at the story of Batman Arkham City, a portion of Gotham has been turned into a giant holding cell for criminals where they have taken over and basically rule a part of Gotham. This would normally be too much for one person if that person wasn't Batman. Everyone knows Batman's reputation, so when you take on the role of the Caped Crusader, the music should make you feel like the situation is dangerous, but you've got everything you need to win. Realistic epic music should seem like this grand adventure that you know you're going to win as long as you put in the effort. As long as you try hard enough, you know you're going to do it. But when you're a kid, you don't see the villains for as dangerous as they are as much as you see Batman for who he truly is. The concept of a hero failing is foreign, and so the music of LEGO video games tends to reflect those same feelings. This is where we get our third subgenre, optimistic epic music. A story that is optimistically epic should convey that there are challenges that don't stand a chance against you. You are the hero. In most LEGO video games, if there's a threat of dying, you don't face the same consequences as other video games. And in many cases, you just respawn in the same place you were just in with full health. To get an idea of what optimistic music sounds like, let's dive into the LEGO Group's first attempt at a massive multiplayer online game, LEGO Universe. When it first came out, it was an online game that required a subscription service of $20 a month, and at the time I got $5 a week for doing my chores. So I saved up all of my money every month just to be able to play LEGO Universe. There were so many amazing worlds to explore, factions to join, plenty of building opportunities, fun mini-games, memorable characters. Everything about it, to me, was perfect. The story you're given from the beginning of the game is that the source of pure imagination has been corrupted, and it's your job as a minifigure to restore imagination while battling the corrupted imagination called the Maelstrom. And you are the hero. You are here to restore imagination, and you are going to do it because you cannot be stopped. How does this feeling of optimism get translated into the main theme of LEGO Universe? Right off the bat, you have an instant feeling of hope and optimism, but what makes it sound so uplifting while also sounding epic? Referring back to how we defined what makes something sound quirky, it does come down to both the sounds and the composition itself. What sets LEGO Universe apart from other epic sounds is the use of traditional nostalgic orchestration. In LEGO Universe, the sounds are brighter and higher in their range, so that the immediate impression is that things are already looking up, even though there's a significant challenge ahead. The use of percussion is also really important when you talk about epic music, because typically you think of the big war drums like taikos or toms. But in LEGO Universe, instead they really focus on the snare drum, which is also used like a war drum, but instead you have this idea of duty, of responsibility, this drive, that you're going to accomplish the mission rather than the mission is going to be a challenge for you. Now, there are two main things within the composition itself that give the idea of heroism and optimism. The first is when we look at the melody, it has a trajectory that tells us about an adventure where we're going to get to overcome and come home. The story that the melody conveys may not be noticed at first, but once you see it written down, it's easy to understand even if you don't know how to read music. We've talked before about how an interval is just the distance between two notes, and one of the most powerful sounding intervals is a perfect fifth. Superman, for example, as the iconic symbol of hope and heroism, has a memorable theme that relies solely on the movement between these notes that make up a perfect fifth. The musical relationship between these two notes is strong and reliable, and is found within most chords in any key. And the very first notes you hear in the LEGO Universe main theme are a perfect fifth, which conveys right off the bat that you are the powerful hero of this story. The adventure you're about to go on is reflected in the melody when the main idea is restated, but deviates away from our starting a note even further. And what you see in the melody is a methodical journey back to the starting note with some surprising leaps and turns, but everything pointing back towards the beginning of the journey, the source of pure imagination. What really caught my attention with this piece of music was actually the chord progression and how they conveyed hope and optimism with the chord structure that they used. One of the cliches about music is that when you want to make something sound happy, you use a major chord. And if you want something to sound sad, you use a minor chord. Which is interesting because LEGO Universe is in the key of D minor. You want to convey optimism and hope, so why would you start in a key that's supposed to sound sad? The composer, Brian Tyler, recognized that sometimes hope is found in the darkest of places first. So if you establish from the beginning a chord that sounds sad, you can inject a lot of hope by what you put around it. And for the first half of the theme, the chord D minor is surrounded by nothing but major chords, showing how just a little change can turn something from dark to light. And the best example of this is actually in the restatement of that first idea, when the D minor chord actually becomes a D major chord through the changing of just one note. We don't have two minor chords near each other until this moment, which may be the darkest moment in the theme. But is soon followed by a chord we haven't seen yet, the A major. And A major as a chord has a similar relationship to D minor as the two notes of a perfect fifth have with each other. It's strong, it's reliable, and A major will always lead back to D minor in a satisfying way. So the music of LEGO Universe tells a story of optimism, that when things are dark there is always hope, and if things seem to be at their darkest point, it may just be a sign that the dawn is coming and we're almost home. There are many other examples of LEGO music being epic in a way that conveys optimism and hope that you are going to overcome whatever challenge comes your way. And that's at the core of the LEGO Group's beliefs, is that if you are given the right tools, you can do whatever you want in your life. All it takes is some intentionality, some hard work, and a little bit of creativity. And that creativity is what we'll talk about in the next video. Thank you very much for watching this video. I really hope you enjoyed it. If you missed the first video where we talked about Lego music sounding quirky, make sure you go and watch that video, and then you can follow it up and see kind of the train of thought if you want to. But if you like this kind of content, make sure that you subscribe, hit the bell so that you're notified when part 3 comes out. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.